Welcome to the Why Music podcast, where we talk to independent artists about their journeys, the inspirations behind their music, and ultimately why they make music. This next artist is a rapper and producer from New York City. His work displays the journey of musical growth as he has put in over a decade into his music. A podcast host, poet, and performer, there's nothing he can't do. Welcome, Mike.
Oh, I love that introduction. Thank you so much. There's things I can't do.
I always like to start with where your journey with music all began.
Gotcha. I was thinking about that earlier because I was like, she's probably going to ask me where my journey of music began. Um, so my mom was super Christian, is super Christian, and growing up, she only played gospel music in the house. My brother, my older brother, 5 years older, being the rebel that he was, and us growing up in Bed-Stuy, naturally being influenced by hip hop of the time. Uh, while of course, this is the 50th anniversary of hip hop. Fun fact. Um, he would always be playing Biggie, Tupac, you name it, just the run of the mill '90s rappers. And I always heard them and I never paid them any mind because I'm like, oh man, you're being so bad. Mom said, don't listen to that. But then there was this kid in class. He would always recite these same lines. I sit back with this pack of zigzags and this bag of this weed. And I'm like, there was something about the cadence, something about the storytelling that really caught my ear. And, I was hearing it without the music. I was just hearing the lyrics from a regular classmate. Come to find out, This Is the Way I Am by Eminem. And I just was like, I want to know more about that particular MC. And I just started listening to a bunch of Eminem. And somehow just hearing that and hearing Eminem made me go, I can do that. Right. So I just kind of started writing music just for the pure sake of understanding those rhythmic patterns and getting words out. And it ended up becoming over the years a form of a major form of expression, especially throughout high school, where I was putting out like a song every week and sharing it with classmates, burning onto CDs and stuff like that. But yeah, that's kind of how it began for me. Just like a few songs that my brother played, and then of course hearing my classmate rap "The Way I Am" by Eminem.
I mean, gospel music and hip hop, I mean, all genres have their shared sort of aspects
Mm,
and things like that. You can connect any two things, even if it's jazz and country. So
yeah,
it's definitely interesting to have two different sorts of somewhat different types of music, like with the gospel background as well
absolutely.
as, being exposed to a lot of hip hop. Um, how do you think that having those two influences has fed into the kind of music that you make?
Well, I will say that I can't speak for every rapper ever, but especially late '90s, 2000s, where people like Common and people like Kanye West were kind of extremely popular. I mean, these guys were either sampling gospel or using some aspect of gospel. Of course, like, Ray Charles, even back in his day, sorry, excuse me. Ray Charles back in his day working with blues and not blues, what am I thinking? Pop and him utilizing sounds from gospel. Like gospel is such an influence, I think, on most genres, let alone in hip hop. And for me, I think the musicality, I think, being in church every Sunday, being a part of that singing process, harmonizing these different songs. And, there's always a bunch of musicians who are super talented who I convened with in some way, form, or another. In fact, we actually had a gospel rap group when I was a kid for a while. And yeah, just that kind of weekly musical influence just kind of seeped in. Um, in what specific ways, I don't know because I don't do gospel music and I don't really partake in that kind of parts. But I do believe that majority of Black American performers have definitely pulled from their gospel roots. I think a lot of us share.
I mean, yeah, I think, I mean, if you think about it in kind of a quite literal sense in terms of like using pieces of gospel, hip hop does it more than really any others with like, sort of like choral, like church choir type feature
But yeah,
sections and whatnot. So it kind of makes sense that those do in some sort of way, walk hand in hand. Um, so with all of,
absolutely. I mean, I just wanted to add to that. Kanye has like the Sunday service thing, and
Mhm.
however complex he is these days, he was able to take essentially his same sampling style, his same rapping style, and somehow turn it into a gospel fest. So even that kind of shows like he was able to recognize the correlation that his music already had to gospel and then utilize that to create a new form of music, so to speak.
No, absolutely. He definitely did a lot in sort of the fusion of those two things. Um,
You know.
at what point in sort of your journey with music did you start to kind of commit to being an artist and start, taking, releasing music and taking those steps, and treating it as more than just for fun?
Yeah. I would say in high school, I was very serious about it without knowing I was very serious about it. So I had mentioned kind of making songs, making beats, showing them to classmates. There was like another rap group that I used to share some beats with. Me and my boy, we did have our gospel group. And I think, I went to school for illustration to be a cartooning animation person. I wanted to, make cartoons and whatnot. Um, and by the time I graduated, I was like, maybe I just want to like write and do music stuff, right? And I had gone off to school to do psychology, switched over to English, didn't finish school. But throughout the entire time period, I was making and sharing music. And I would say around 19, my old classmate named Scott, he contacted me. Was like, look, we were the best rappers in school. That was a very objective opinion for him. And he's like, we should start a group and really try to do this music thing. And I would say from the age of 19, pretty much on, is when I was like hitting performances, trying to get on stage, trying to get in venues, being under 21 and how difficult that was. Connecting with some post punk individuals, some new wave individuals who let me perform in their basements and their spare spaces that they had available, kind of like community things they were doing for a while. So yeah, it was around 19 where it was like, well, I'm just going to do this. And honestly, I don't feel like there was a real conscious decision. I think I'd been doing it for so long that it just felt natural. Um, I don't know if there was ever a point where it was like, yeah, I should rap. I think it was more just like, oh, this is what I've been doing for the last 5 years and I like it. So I'll just continue.
So it just really kind of naturally manifested itself from, something that you were really doing the whole time and just didn't recognize that it was such a big part of everything that you were doing.
Absolutely.
What do you find most often inspires your writing?
Um, so I I think it's real life. I think a lot of my songs are me kind of just talking about what's going on with me. My last project that I put out in lieu of, which fun fact really just means in lieu of an album because I want to get an album together. But I was like, I got these 3 tracks, I'll give them that in the meantime. So in lieu of an album, um, it's 3 particular songs that mean 3 different things. It's free for freedom, and free talks about a lot of kind of social political issues that has been going around for a while. And then Gut Feelings is actually a re-release of a song where I actually talk about the idea of what a perfect situation would be. It's low key toxic, but it's fun. And then the last one, More Than Enough, is like the daddy issue song, which totally comes from actual experiences with my own father. Um, and most of my music does that. Every now and then I try to go a little fictional, a little fun with it, but it's usually capturing what's actually going on in my life, what has gone on in my life, or something I'm hopeful for. Um, and I try to make genuine music from those perspective. I think party music, pop music, whatever is fine. It's fun. But for me as a writer, I think it's really important to show authenticity and really speak on what's actually happening in my life in a way that helps other people connect. And I've been fortunate to make feel people help people feel connected through my music. So
I think in lieu of is that's just a funny little title, especially because it quite literally is in place of an album. Is
yeah.
that and is that something that you still plan on doing an album as a follow up?
Absolutely. So I've been slowly working on a new project that has no name. I keep joking with people that it's a breakup album, mostly because I kind of started working on it after my latest breakup. And it really is a project that captures a lot of difficult situations that's happened between me and people overall. So not just my ex-partner, but different situations with friends and former colleagues. And it's just kind of this release of tension and aggression in those spaces. Many of the songs written very shortly after a very particular thing happened. And then, of course, do the writing process, kind of reliving that. So I'm about 6 songs deep as far as the production and the writing goes. I didn't record anything yet, but my goal is to kind of go for a lengthier album. I feel like lengthier albums are finally coming back. So I'm probably going to try to do a minimum 15 songs. So I got some work to do. But I can see it being released sometime between spring and summer-ish, but probably closer in spring.
Awesome. Um, I so what was it about the in lieu of, I mean, it could just simply be that you had those 3 songs done and wanted to put something out before any sort of album, but what was it that kind of connected those together that made you want to put them in a mini project rather than just drop them by themselves?
Oh, that's a great question. So, um, it's interesting because more than enough, been sitting on it for almost a year. Gut Feelings, the love song of the project. Like I said, it's a re-release of a song that came out, I don't know, 2017 or something. And then Free was probably the most new song. I am working with an artist named Super Galloway. I'm producing sound engineering his album. His second album. We did the first one sometime last year. And every now and then they have a beat, and I'm like, bro, I need you to bless this. I need you to give me a verse. And I had been thinking, like, what do I do with this thing? And so as I was thinking about the fact that, like, hey, let's have some fun. Let's put some music out. Let's not keep people waiting too long. Content is like such a thing I feel like we have to worry about as artists these days. And I'm going through my own process of kind of understanding that better. But I was like, it would be fun to kind of just put something out, kind of just have it. And I did 3 videos, a video for each one, around essentially capturing the vibe of, freedom, love, and father. And yeah, I think I came to the conclusion that these 3 things were, to some degree, things I had been really kind of struggling with recently, right? So obviously on the social political level, we have a lot going on with many different groups of people. And being an American just feels daunting some days. So freedom, right? That's really up for grabs. So in lieu of freedom, then, having gone through the breakup recently, it's like, well, in lieu of love. So let me reimagine what love looks like again. And then with More Than Enough, uh, since the altercation that encouraged me to write the song regarding my father, things hadn't improved. In fact, gotten worse. And it just felt like, oh man, all right, in lieu of a father, like what does that continue to look like for me? And those 3 songs are really kind of, they work together through that way, realizing that there was something going on in my life at the time of the release where it was like, yep, it just makes sense. Here is a fun Easter egg, and it might not happen, so maybe I shouldn't say it, but I've been thinking about dropping 3 other songs that are sitting around.
Mm-hmm.
Called, I mean, you're a fellow musician, we just have songs sitting around.
Of course.
But it's the idea is to drop another 3 called But Also This. And that's entirely in lieu of But Also This. It's kind of like a double EP kind of thing. And the songs I've been thinking about there really are songs I was going to put out as singles with features, but the features aren't getting back to me because humans. And I thought it'd be kind of funny to finish the song and say, but also this, just take it, leave me alone. So I don't know. I'm not 100% on it yet, but I guess by the time those features hear this, they might feel like there's some like flame under their ass and finish up the songs. But if not, but also this might be in people's inboxes in the next few months.
No, I like that, the kind of duality of that. But I like what you said about how the 3 connected for in lieu of, because I don't know if you've experienced this or if this is how kind of that explanation sort of transpired, but putting projects together, sometimes it's just oh, you're working on all these things, they kind of fit the same vibe, so you just put them together,
Yeah.
and then it's like upon reflection, it's like, wait, like these things kind of all go together on a different level from what I originally anticipated. Like there's pieces of
Absolutely.
all of these different tracks that connect to each other in a new way that kind of culminates the experience all that much more, because it's like, there's a reason that we wrote all of these amongst the same time period. There's a reason that they kind of all
Yeah.
transpired in the same way. So it's interesting sometimes how it's like, oh, you wrote a bunch of songs to put together an album or an EP or something, but
Yeah.
there's actually more that's really telling the whole story than just I wrote them all together, you know.
Absolutely. So it's funny because the new project, because I recognize that I have different ways of even making beats. So
Mhm.
the next project, I can't just use any beat I have because there's some beats I have that are like soul samples, right? And then there's like some production I do with almost no samples, and it feels, I guess, more musical is the word I'm looking for. Then there's some things I do with, original production, original composition that doesn't feel as musical, but there's something about this album where the music feels emotional as the words, like the emotion matches. But the songs I have for But Also This, um, it's kind of ironic because those songs are all either samples or things that, I don't know, I wouldn't say like a fleeting emotion. Like, yes, I felt that in that moment, but almost the song reflects and solves its own issue. That's almost true with like all three of the songs before, But Also This. Wow, the album, every song is more like, nope, this is the problem. This is what's going on here. It's just giving you a fact and making you sit with it, as ugly or whatever as it might be.
Yeah, it's interesting how projects kind of come together, and and especially
Mhm.
when is when you are intentionally making the decision to put a collective work together, you have to kind of have a little bit of a filter on it to make it really like a collective work on the sonic side of things. And then the rest of it
Absolutely.
just kind of happens on its own. Um,
Yeah.
because I think, when we're put in the same sorts of situations, like in what you're saying with working with a certain type of or like subtype of beat, it
Yeah.
sort of already in itself, by making that decision, you're already kind of directing the process of what kind of track you're going to make and what kind of song you're
Agreed.
going to write. So it's like you're already, by making that sonic choice, you're it's essentially just making it easier for yourself to make the collective work truly collective.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. Yeah.
If you had to create a new genre around your style of music, what would you call it?
Um, who I don't have a great answer for that. I'm thinking about what the new project is and how much it already reminds me. And maybe I'm bigging myself up a bit too much, but hey, whatever. Miss Morale and the Big Steppers by Kendrick Lamar. Um, and the vulnerability more MCs are showing. Tyler the Creator's last album, Call Me If You Get Lost, and the deluxe version of it, the Stay So, isn't as emotionally open, but he's more emotionally open as a lyricist. And you can kind of see that in some of the things he talks about and being honest and essentially asking for forgiveness in some of his songs, which he does. Um, and I like to think that I'm connecting with whatever frequency that is. And I feel like hip hop, especially when we think of the 80s and 90s, hip hop has been mostly about this idea that I'm bigger than life. I'm boisterous, mega stars like LL Cool J coming out the gate, very much like, Mama said knock you out, and I'm that guy. I mean, literally, his name is Ladies Love Cool J. Um, and hip hop has changed relatively on that level, at least through artists like Coda the Friend, like Kendrick Lamar, Tyler the Creator, and a few others. No name for sure. But I think there's this vulnerability that's shining through a lot more and a lot more of a honest way, not really trying to cover the scars. In fact, walking out the scars out and being like, take me as I am. Um, and again, I don't know if I have a name for that, but there's something emotive about that frequency of hip hop that I'm seeing more of, that I love, that I really appreciate. There's a couple of smaller names I wish I could think of right now to give them some love that I hear similar songs where it's just like they just open up their heart and kind of give it to the audience in a way that's more than I want to be rich and move out the hood, or this kind of millionaire dream thing that we're kind of used to in pop music overall. It's definitely very much like, this is what I'm doing, this is what I did, or this is how I was treated, and this is why I am the way I am. And I think that's really a beautiful thing. So yeah, I'm gonna say emotive hip hop. That would be my subgenre or some shit. I don't know.
No, I think where you're heading with that all kind of aligns. It makes sense with kind of what we were just talking about, and the influence, and the in lieu of, but also this, but also, the
Yeah.
album as well. It kind of all transpires into something along those lines. I think especially being, hip hop in itself isn't always, in a lot of cases, like the most emotionally fronting type of music in comparison to maybe some others. So having that sort of catered into the title, in some way, shape, or form, just kind of, specifies it a little bit more and categorizes it further in a good way.
Yeah, emotive pop. That's what we're calling it. We just named it.
All right. Is there a song that you've written that you think best embodies who you are as an artist, in terms of, you have one song to really show someone and sell them on exploring the rest of your catalog, being your next fan, coming to your next show, et cetera, et cetera? What song do you show them to kind of convince them to be your fan?
So I've been doing more poetry and spoken word events, and one thing I love to do, even though I love my production, I think it's really important to make sure people hear the words, because I put a lot of effort into the words. And when I started going to poetry events, I felt kind of like an outsider, because I was like, I don't really have poetry. And many people have continually argued with me that rap is poetry, but rap has been kind of on the sidelines of poetry for a while, especially because of the way rap is written and the way different people portray different sides of rap, right? Like, you hear Common, you hear poetry, but you hear Lil Wayne, not quite. And it's not to say he's not a poet, but it just doesn't translate the same.
Mhm.
So I have a piece called Gifted Dude that I started doing as spoken word, with all the kind of in time emotions that comes with the complexities of the lyrics. And Gifted Dude is the first song on my other EP called Never Settle. And it is originally written to the beat, the intro by the XX from their album. And it's just this truthful, honest journey about a lot of shit that happened in my life. Like, I literally heard the beat one day. It was actually the day I ran like per diem hours for a job I was working. They were like, we got nothing for you. And I was pretty much screwed. I heard the beat and I just wrote all, I think, 64 bars of the song in one sitting. And it's just this journey of, reflection. It's this journey of sadness. It's this journey of hopefulness. And all of this is pretty much captured through the entire telling of it. And then at the end is where that hopefulness comes in, where I'm like, I've decided what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it, and that's it. And I love doing that piece, because it does challenge me to tap into the emotions of the day I wrote it, literally. And there's, a great rhythmic pattern to it. It's wordy, but it feels, it's like poetry literally in real time when I do it, which is great. And people really feel it and connect with it. And usually after hearing it, people want to know more, if not about my music, about me, but usually about the music as well. So I would say Gifted Dude from the project Never Settle.
Yeah. gifted dude. So no matter how I move, I still get the groove. That mean I get to choose. See, I'm great with people, but also great with tunes. I wrote an essay for a story about a girl I liked. A critique was due. Picture her window, she's smiling down, waving as I pass, blowing kisses too. That was in the past. My new life like a car with no steering wheel, trying not to crash. It's expensive though, so many people envy. Cause when I'm swerving out of control, my tank is never empty. That mean I got that drive to put in plain and simply. But I'm not in control, the talk and roll that tempts me. That's an exit plan, or I could buckle up and ride this corrupted simulation out like a fucking man. That would imply maybe I'm just a coward. Mama shouldn't name me courage, but she named me power. Always forward. Forward always, though the walls are closing in, it's like I'm in a hallway. Devil playground, nothing more than foreplay. Working out the work up for cold, so I'm sipping OJ. I never take off work, don't give me no days. We're working underpaid, the shit that they won't give me no raise. Today was my last day, co-workers saying no stay. Like I even had a choice, I retort no way.
I think it's really unique that you answered that with something that, you know, in at least in your mind is thought of more as spoken word than truly like in the rap and music sense.
Yeah.
Do you find a lot of correlation or like connection between the stuff that you create directly to be music and the stuff that you write in sort of a poetry sense? Like, is there essentially also when you go to create in general, is there a certain sort of thought process between choosing to go more of a spoken word route versus music? Like, what kind of does each approach look like in comparison to one another?
Gotcha. So for a while, I've kind of always separated the idea of rap, poetry, and stories from each other. And the funny thing is that in my raps, like all the elements exist in my raps. So that was a great thing about doing Gifted Dude, because all those elements were already there. There was some storytelling, there was poetry, but it also feels like a rap song. While my stories are always stories, you know, there's no particular rhythm you can pick up to that goes well with a beat. And then when I sit down to like write an actual like line by line poem that doesn't rhyme, especially for me, that's more like how do I express these emotions or these thoughts in a way that captures them authentically. It's not, you know, some poets like to be super wordy or super this or that and the other. Sometimes I'm like, this was just weird. No one talk about it. I have a piece called I'm Not a Buddhist that I was inspired by when I went to the K2 night, free museum night at the Rubin Museum over near 14th Street. And I was able to do a tour for free, and I learned a bunch of things about Buddhism, but it just inspired me to write a piece about some things. And so I approached that poem strictly from the perspective of how do I connect the emotions that I feel were like relate to what I learned today to the facts of Buddhism or the religious aspects, the spiritual aspects of Buddhism. And that's how I approach that thing. But usually when I write a rap song, it's just like, well, what we doing? And it just kind of happens and pours out. There is some structure management based on what's happening. Again, Gifted Dude and many other songs are written in one go. But some of the songs I'm working on now, like I have the first verse, I just wrote a line for like the chorus a day or two ago. I'll probably write the second verse in 6 months. You know, it just depends on kind of what comes to me. And depending on the song, you know, like I would never do my song Gut Feelings at a poetry event. It just doesn't make sense. It's a, you know, if anything, it's more of a pop song. It's more of a dancey song. It's fun. It's uplifting. It's, you know, it has a good vibe, but it doesn't translate, in my opinion, into poetry. But a song like, well, I'm just thinking of, it's one of the songs from a new project where I'm actually discussing the fact that I chose myself over another person. I can imagine me doing that in a poetry event in the near future because it is the elements, like I was saying, like it's rappable, it's poetry, it can go well with a beat. It's a story to some degree. Those things exist in that song, while Gut Feelings might be a beat and story, but the poetry is lacking. So that's kind of how I think about it. Hope that was, kind of a clear answer.
No, that makes sense. I mean, art is art. Sometimes it just kind of translates naturally in the way that it's going to translate itself.
Mhm.
And, if if you have your hand in all of those different sorts of areas, you start to kind of get a sense of, okay, this feels very like this for me versus
Yeah.
like this might kind of just come out this way. It also, like you said, like some of the things that you write with the intent of being poetry aren't going to translate as well into music. And sometimes maybe they will. Sometimes maybe something starts out as a poem and then turns into a song. Sometimes maybe a song turns into a
Absolutely.
poem. Sometimes maybe they just stay as their own thing.
Yeah.
It's a case by case basis. There's not really
Agreed.
there's no it's the beauty and the struggle of art where it's like there is no like cut clear reason or
Oh, yeah.
direction all the time or anything like that. So it just kind of really like
I mean, it
basically you're
shouldn't be. I mean, I think
no,
that's
it's
the thing
yeah,
about art. You never know how it's going to go.
100%. Um, if you had to pick two or three artists that you think your music is like a combination of, who would you choose?
So if I had to pick, I would say that well, anyone who's listened to me, when I tell them that two of my biggest influences are Kanye and Eminem, they're like, "Yep, okay, I hear it now." Um, I think the Eminem part on the way I write, sometimes the way I rhyme, and I think the Kanye part on the music production. Um, People have compared my lyrical and production style for their ears to Q-Tip, which I find quite flattering because he's brilliant. Um, but if I really could just pick, I would say that I like to think I have comparable storytelling to artists like Kendrick Lamar. I love his storytelling. One of my favorite songs from him is "How Much a Dollar Cost," and I love the way he's able to tell or provide, I want to say, perspective through interesting storytelling. I think he's really good at that. Um, Production wise, I would probably say my sound. I'd probably hold to Kanye mostly because he was just a massive influence when I first started making beats at like 12 or 13. Again, super complex individual who I'm not a fan of anymore, unfortunately. But I can't deny his his what I learned from him. I learned a lot. I think as a listener growing up to Kanye, and then and that would be true with Eminem as well. So I don't know, maybe those three. I mean, I've always been a big Common fan. Um, I feel like Common storytelling is a lot more poetic than mine. Using that, in my own kind of subjective way. But um, yeah, I find that those three, maybe Common, Kanye, and Eminem as a final answer, I would say has definitely my style is definitely some sort of combination of what they brought to hip hop.
I think that those kind of as a combination just kind of also adds more to what we were discussing earlier with it being more emotive and expressive.
Yes. I mean,
Like
those three are
that's
such great examples of that in hip hop.
yeah, and I think, I've talked about this previously, certain aspects of hip hop and even into rap, where the line is drawn, I don't really know. I don't think there is always. But it's kind of gone into a little bit too commercialized in terms of like it's just gotten overly, like I said, commercialized.
Yeah.
It's not what it used to be. And I much more enjoy that era of that kind of music than what is now what we're looking at as far as modern day rap specifically, but also some bit of hip hop kind of
Yeah.
culminated into that.
I get that. I think it's really interesting when I have conversations with people about hip hop because the journey through hip hop can seem very kind of linear and then just went off map.
Mhm.
But we have to remember that the first form of hip hop was shit talking, right? With boisterous, bigger than life shit talking. The next form of hip hop was slightly conscious, right? We have Public Enemy and even NWA, but going into gangster rap, right? So then that was a huge part of hip hop. And then we had the South come up with like kind of party music and all this other stuff, and they got a bad rap. And around that time, we had the Backpackers, the Kanye's and stuff who want to talk about regular life stuff. And then we kind of see these different transitions until like things like mumble rap came in, and things like what we're seeing now. And I think hip hop and as a culture deserves a bit of a pass because it just went through like a natural cycle. As much as people are a little bit upset with the new rappers, they're doing exactly, in my opinion, what the pioneers did. They're taking something and with no tools, with no understanding or no way to really kind of utilize it. Like when I first started rapping, things like FL Studio, certain electronic programs, Pro Tools and stuff like that was really kind of growing and becoming available to people. And that provided me a certain opportunity. So now these kids coming up, they have the TikToks, they have this, they have that, and the other. I mean, people are literally being signed because they have 1 million listens or views on TikTok over a song they did in their bedroom. And I think oftentimes from a purist perspective, as a listener, we tend to disconnect what that looked like 50 years ago versus what that looks like today. And in my opinion, it's the same shit. It's a bunch of people with very little tools utilizing what they have. And, they're children, right? Like they're literally being like, I'm doper than you. I'm great. They're doing whatever drugs they're doing that's popular for them at this time, just like they did 50 years ago. It's really, and I mean, I'll probably get a lot of flack for saying it, but I personally think it's really the same thing. And you can go back and hear a lot of terrible music. In fact, I think one of the things that we deny ourselves the fact of is that back then, if you got on, it was the idea that you were pretty good out of the group of people, whatever, because that's what it took. But even if you listen to these pretty good people, there's a lot of people who are not that good. And then you go all the way to now where, what it takes to hear an artist, like you can go on Spotify, you probably type in a little blah, blah, blah and find a new artist. There's literally playlists, as you know, for new artists coming out and stuff like that, and you can hear their music. So the ability to create a song and put it out is so much easier, which is a good thing, but it also just feels like it's cheapening the genre. So I don't know. I'm very much so like let the kids play, so to speak, because I feel like there's a lot of older gatekeepers who feel like they're destroying the genre, and the way I think of it, I feel like they're doing exactly what the pioneers did in their own way. And we might not like it today, but it's probably going to be in the history books of hip hop 20 years from now. So
that's fair. I'll own it. I'm not that well versed in any sort of backlog of it, like what you're talking about in terms of pioneers. The first name that you mentioned that I recognize was like Public Enemy. So like anything prior to I don't even know a ton about them, but like anything prior to that, I don't really like, a lot of the terms that you mentioned, I am not like, that went over my head. I don't, I don't know, but
I appreciate
that
cool.
makes sense in terms of, pointing it out clearly. We've just repeated history in a way of like, where things started is kind of where it's circled back. So I stand by what I prefer, but that does make a little bit more preference. That makes a little bit more sense in terms of like how it's all transpired. And It does almost like give a little bit more value and recognition to where things are now, given the sort of historical connection.
Yeah, now and hold on to your preferences, because I am judgmental as hell when it comes to hip hop. I just allowed myself, I think, over the years to recognize that journey. But no, there's some stuff I'm just like, God, please stop. So that's okay.
What is the ideal listening scenario for someone to consume your music in?
If you've been a fan of my music for the last few years, you'll probably say smoking, which I think is ironic because I don't smoke. I don't participate in the devil's lettuce, but many of my listeners are big fans of smoking to my music. They feel like, it's kind of like this mind altering opportunity to like really just kind of get into the music. And if I could create the scenario for a listener, it would be comparable by way of, maybe grab a glass of wine, tea, something like that, and really just kind of sit with the music. I like to do that kind of thing when I'm listening to like a new album or something. I want to kind of be present, especially if I know it's going to be very wordy. Like when I heard Kendrick's project, it was definitely like, let me sit still and kind of take it in. And I would suggest to a listener to do something similar, to really kind of sit still and allow yourself to take in what I'm saying. And if the devil's lettuce is the preference of choice, enjoy.
No, that's funny. I think, I also agree. Like when you're sort of taking in like a new project, like when I would be at home, like back home, I would walk my dogs. I'd take them for like 40 minutes. So I was like, I have about the amount of time to go through your kind of typical album length. So it's just like, just plugging that in and then just kind of going on, because all you're really doing is worrying about who they're barking at. So if you're not worried about that, then you're listening to what you got in your ears. So it's just like, it's a nice, like kind of start to finish experience as I kind of trail through the neighborhood. And just really kind of, especially with like a first sort of listen, is always, it's always nice to kind of, if you're someone like myself who doesn't ever want to just sit still and consume something like that, having some sort of like borderline sitting still outdoor version.
Oh yeah,
it's always
a nice
nice
walk around the park or outside, some fresh air. I definitely would add that. I love to go for a walk and listen to things.
Yeah, it's I feel like it's almost like it adds to the experience, even by adding in other sort of sensory factors, because like because I feel like if you're just like intentionally, and again, at least for me who's easily distracted, like, and if you're intentionally like sort of isolating your other sort of experiences with just trying to focus on this one thing, you're almost more easily distracted. You're almost more easily like paying attention to something else. Whereas it's like all you're doing is like walking along, and that's the only thing. It's just freeing your mind a little bit more to almost be more receptive in a weird way.
Absolutely. I mean, you put a lot of your senses into like auto, instead of trying to cut it off. So instead of saying, hey, let's just literally be still, you're more like, all right, my legs are moving, I'm getting fresh air, sun's hitting me. So yeah, I think your sensors are definitely doing some work, but in an automatic way where you don't have to think about it. That's a good point.
What is it that you think sets you apart from other independent artists?
Something I have in my bio was something I said in the interview when I was my friend JB for his Young Whippersnapper podcast mentioned he interviewed me over my project 2020 when I did my project in 2020. And it was the chance for a person to hear an adult talk about adult problems. I can think of so many top selling artists, not the ones I mentioned, obviously, who are still complaining about strippers in their music, how they fell in love with one and she didn't feel the same or whatever, or how they're in the trap, or they used to sell drugs and look at me now or whatever. And I take no qualms with that. I just think that what I love about Call Me If You Get Lost by Tyler, and I could mention Kendrick's again, but I want to mention this one specifically because instead of it being about like struggles and everything, he's having fun with life. But he's talking about it as an adult having fun with life. It's not, I just bought a new Bugatti. I mean, one of his lines, he says, I won an award and didn't know how to celebrate, so I spent money on a car. It was very like, not like I have money, I'm going to get a car. It was all like, yo, this really big thing happened to me and I can't really process it, so I guess I'll buy a car, which I thought was kind of a really interesting way to think about, celebrating. So yeah, I mean, for me, that's sometimes you're gonna have to rephrase. Ask me a question again. Sometimes I go on my tangents and I'm like, what was the question? But there was a connection there, I promise.
Oh, it's all good. What do you think sets you apart from other independent artists?
Oh, okay, yeah, thank you. So using that Tyler reference, for me, I think being able to talk about issues as an adult, you know. And I mean, I'm trying to think, like, for example, with like, okay, More Than Enough being a song about my dad, but like being a real song about something that happened recently as an adult with my father, as opposed to, I think, what we have gotten in hip hop a lot. Very daddy wasn't there, very like, you know, I don't know how to kind of process this thing. It's like, no, my father was around, but what's the difficulties that I'm struggling with him now as an adult and as he gets older and all those type of things. How do those expectations show up now where I am in life as opposed to like or like when I was younger or this kid and everything. And I find that hip hop is really I think I forgot who said it. It was a famous rapper who said like hip hop is like a young man's game. And I'm fine with that. But if you're not young, maybe don't act like it. Because you have so much value to give with what you know and who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's such a neglected thing. And as I get older, like I have a friend who's, I don't know, I think he's like 65 or something. And he raps and he's amazing. And he actually used to rap back in the day and knew some of the some like people like Queen Latifah and stuff. Um, but what I love about his style is that, you know, he's this old dude who's rapping like his age, you know, he's talking about things from a very wise and overseeing kind of perspective. So yeah, I think more rappers should rap at their age. And I think I do that really, really well. And you're definitely not going to hear me complaining again about a stripper who doesn't like me. Like, I'm like, come on, Drake. Like, I get it, but move on.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think that that would be an automatic implication. You'd think that that would be a role that we're already taking, but I mean, there's something about it that just people aren't like doing, and for some reason it doesn't make sense to me. To me, the obvious sort of direction to go would be exactly what you're saying. Like,
Absolutely.
like essentially say what you know, write about what you know. You don't need to
Absolutely.
like be like, it just like it makes sense that way. The other way doesn't make sense.
Well, I think about the nature of pop music and how there's always been this idea of reaching a demographic. When people ask me about my demographic, I kind of my stomach turns in like a particular way, and it's not that I don't respect metrics or understand the importance of those type of things, but I'm
Mhm.
like, all right, let's really think about this for a second. Um, yeah, maybe high schoolers are the biggest consumers of blah blah blah, but also I don't really relate to them. Sorry.
Right.
And I think many artists are very concerned about how they're going to connect with people. And so instead of, you know, being authentic, they think, okay, well, if I look at it from this perspective and do it this particular way, then that'll be a way that people can grasp it better. And I've always been kind of like, or I would say more recently, just kind of accepted the idea that like I'm going to connect with who I connect with. And that's it. That's fine. Sometimes when I look at my numbers, I think my range tends to be like 25 to 45 type of joint. Like those are my majority listeners. 18, 14, they're like, who's this guy? I'm good. I don't know what he's talking about.
No, and I've said this before. It's been a minute since I've said it, so I'll say it again. I've said this before on here. It's that, like, to me, my thought is, and if you put in the time long enough and aren't just in it to do it and say you did it, all music will find where it's supposed to go. It might not do it right away. It might do it right away if you're lucky or just that on the nose, but everything will find its way to the people that it's meant to find its way to, as long as you give it the opportunity to, as long as you put it out there into the space for it to be received and put it out there in a way that people can consume it. It
Absolutely.
will be consumed by the right people. And it's one of those things too, is it's like, if you are, if you're trying to, for example, if you were trying to write for everybody and you were trying to write for high school and that's not you, you're going to fall flat to all ears. It's not going to, because you're not doing something that's matching with what you're all about and who you are and all of that. So if you're writing for something that isn't you and is, more expansive than narrow, it's almost going to, even though you're targeting a larger group, you're lowering your
You're
chances.
gonna
It's
miss
like,
everyone.
I mean, it's the
Yeah.
more kind of specific and targeted you can be and more direct about what it is you're all about, the more of a true sort of audience you'll cultivate. Because if you're just trying to, like my music's for everybody, or like,
Oh.
this is for anybody who, it's like, then it's music for anybody is music for nobody,
Absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
you can't create for everyone. Everybody's different.
Yeah.
Like music for me might not be music for you, might not be music for somebody else, but it's for
Absolutely.
somebody, like,
Yeah. I mean, that's why we have so many genres, that's why we have so many subgenres within
right.
genres. Hip hop alone has like 12 subgenres now. Like, and not everything lands for everybody.
Right. And you can't create what you don't know. Can't create what
Yeah.
you don't connect to. What
Agreed.
impact do you want to have with your music and with your artistry?
Discovery of self. Was having this conversation with someone the other day, actually a random person who was on the train in Delaware. We were both waiting for the train to show up, and they asked me a similar question. And I think something I'm learning about myself is that self-discovery is really interesting to me. Obviously, my self-discovering myself, but also that journey for each person, and my music being a vessel for someone to learn something about themselves, to feel connected, to feel understood, is really important to me. And I noticed that like my podcast, where I talk about my book, which is a collection of short stories and poems called Faces, that has been a chance for me to talk with my co-host JB and really discover more about myself. But also, I've connected with him and connected with some listeners because I was able to be authentic and open about certain things that made people feel less alone, made people feel better understood. And that's really important to me, to be able to, I guess, kind of usher individuals to self-discovery, learn more about themselves, and grow in ways that feel comfortable and good for them, and and for whatever journey they're on.
I mean, that's all you can really want, right? You know what I mean? It's all you can really kind of encourage in other people through everything that you do, is just essentially without like saying it in any other way, but just kind of essentially basically being like, best of luck, but like in an actual true encouraging direction way, not just like good luck. So it's it's nice to have that sort of intent behind what you're doing, being that it is
absolutely.
like, it's because it's, especially with kind of what you were talking about with your stuff, is it comes from a place of self-discovery. It comes from a place of your own journeys and experiences. And so only to wish that in a positive, healthy manner upon other people is, it's the cycle. It's just the transference of that sort of experience and direction.
Absolutely. It's been really interesting because, though I write in that way, I've just found through like individuals letting me know that that's what happens for them. They hear it and then they see more of themselves, which, as a writer, and I think about that, and I always encourage writers to do this, is like, the more specific you are, you might think you're pushing people away, or you're creating a greater barrier, but you're actually doing the opposite, right? Because though someone may not resonate with that specific experience, you being brave enough to share that specific experience, it doesn't have to be a bad experience, but just the bravery, I think it's a bravery there. Someone shared an artist with me, and every song they talked about how sad they were, how depressed they were, how happy they were, whatever. And they use those kind of words like I'm killing it or I'm not well, but not one time did they tell us why. And I thought that was so frustrating, right? Because I'm like, I have no clue who you are. I have nothing to connect with. Yeah, I've been sad before, but why are you sad, right? Maybe I've been sad for the same reasons. Maybe I've been sad for a reason that resonates with what you spoke about. I find that terribly annoying, fun fact. But I think it's really important to kind of allow yourself to narrow in on that experience, again, good or bad, because it allows people to really connect better.
No, 100%. It's one of the most baffling things at times that it's the most detailed and descriptive songs that never even quite touch on the nose what they're ultimately trying to say are the ones that
Yeah.
resonate the most with people. It's like as specific and detailed as the story can get, the more impact it's going to have. But if you're just saying I'm happy or I'm sad, then it's like, great, who cares? It's nuts that it's so
Exactly.
like, it's, because it's like you could use 1,000 words and never one of them is the emotion that you're feeling, but people will understand.
Absolutely.
But how? I don't know. It's nuts.
I just think we're complex, connected people, and it makes me think of "Cleaning Out My Closet" by Eminem, like how big of a song that was, and that was hella specific. Like he had this intense hate for his mom that he shared through his music in general, but definitely through that song. And although I feel like most of us kids did not feel that way about our parents, I do think that any anger we felt through our adults or parents or older people in general, I think we were able to resonate with that portion of it. So even though we didn't share, literally on Eminem shit, "I'll kill you, mom," because that was his thing. We shared in, I think, the idea that someone was frustrated towards an adult, and we know what that's like. And I think that shows up in so many well-written songs. And when people don't do that, that's something I'm very critical about. I'm like, bro, what's going on here?
No, it's just wild how it kind of, it's the storytelling. It goes back to the storytelling of it all, and it's the words that tell more of the story, and the music is just kind of the canvas that it's painted upon. It just kind of enhances the experience of the story.
Yeah, I love that.
I think that brings us to the final question, which is ultimately, why music?
Oh, okay. I knew you were gonna ask me that. I was like, she's gonna say, "Why music?" That's the vibe. Let's see, why music? Well, I think every human being is a creator. And I think that we all have obviously things we're interested in and things that feel like it's natural to us. If I'm to be honest, I don't think I was ever a natural musician. Um, Illustration kind of came to me really easily. But what I learned through that was that I was illustrating. One of my teachers, Miss Barber in 5th grade, she's like, "Yo, it was an English teacher. So she's like, it's great that you're using a journal for art, but maybe tell the story of what's happening with the pictures." And I fell in love with the storytelling. I fell in love with expressing ideas and letting people know what's going on. And though I did continue to draw for maybe the next 10 years or so, I think what stuck with me was the fact that I could express myself in some sort of way. And, there's through years of doing that through music, I think there's that thing about like 10,000 hours or whatever. I think I really just kind of put in that time to kind of grow as a musician. So now it's the most natural form of creativity that I have to express myself. Um, so I think that's why music. I think now I'm, and sometimes it's difficult for me to say, but I'm an expert in it. I love it. It's such a huge part of my DNA at this point. Um, and it's a way for me to tell a story, and telling stories seem to be a very important thing to me. And so music is the way to do it.
I mean, I think I love that it kind of started, like you said, like you originally were going to study like animation, illustration, or cartooning, I guess. How that kind of translated into music just essentially on accident is just really cool. And the fact that you stuck with it, and it just kind of was something that kept popping up, and that's what kind of led you to keep sticking with it. It just kind of adds to really saying what the impact of music and the kind of power that it holds really is, because there's nothing like it. There's nothing that is ever going to be a like competitor, if you will. Like, it's always going to have this huge driving force in
Absolutely.
everyone's life.
I mean, I don't know the science behind it, but you hear a baby cool or whatever, they're usually singing along as they're trying to figure out words and stuff like that. There's just melody, just a part, and harmonizing is just a part of the human experience. And some of the oldest forms of music is just us literally harmonizing. When you think of like a Gregorian chant or any indigenous groups, they just made noise in a way that was pleasing. Nature makes music between birds and all the other things, even the sound of a wind sometimes. So yeah, I think to your point, music is literally nature. And for me, the storytelling part got me into appreciating it. But I do think that music overall is just a magical thing that's so unique in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, there's no better way to put it. It is just an unmatched, beautiful thing.
Oh yeah.
I think that brings us to the end of this episode of the Why Music podcast. Check back again next week for another conversation with another independent artist. Thanks for listening.